Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Well, now that it's down to the wire, we'll talk politics and get some predictions about who's going to win and who's going to lose. Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, Tommy Thompson or Tammy Baldwin. And we'll talk about the last-minute decision by the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel to stop making any political endorsements. All right, let me introduce our guests. We have longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally with us. And Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, oftentimes a fill-in host. You hear him over on WISN Radio. You know Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. Let's get right into it. Presidential politics first. Who's going to win and by how much and why? How about you first?
I don't know who's going to win. I honestly don't. I think in Wisconsin in particular, it's very close. If you listen to people who were at both rallies, the one for the president in Green Bay and the one for Mitt Romney in West Dallas, it's a draw. I mean, they're both drawing enthusiastic crowds in this state. I'd say still that Romney has momentum with him. There are a lot of people who are just as enthusiastic for him as the president's crowds were for him 4 years ago. It's all come down to a turnout game. It really has. And if you can motivate your people to get out on Election Day, I think that's where the difference is going to be. It's amazing how sophisticated some of these turnout models have become in terms of ground game. They know who's already gone out to vote pretty much. I mean, they can take a look at the names of those who've gone to vote, match them up against their demographic profiles, where they live, what their past voting patterns have seemed to be. It's just amazing what kinds of information they have. And so if in Green Bay, the pre-election day turnout has been such that the Dems have to go and make sure that they do more to get their people out on Election Day, I think that's the kind of information that will be used by both parties to drive Election Day turnout, and we're not going to know really who won until the night of, and I do believe it's going to be razor close.
Barack Obama, President Obama is really going for the younger vote. Saturday with Katy Perry, pop star in Milwaukee. Monday again with Bruce Springsteen, the biggest rock star ever in Madison. Is that the way he should be going?
Well, it's one way to go. I mean, he's gone lots of ways. I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously that's a bit the more of that generation turns out, the better for the Democrats.
Do they turn out?
Yeah,
they do.
They absolutely do. But they obviously turn out less than say seniors, for instance. And there's plenty of other advertising aimed at what would happen to Medicare and Social Security under Republicans, things like that. I mean, there are different messages targeted to different people. I think the going into this final weekend, just the fact of that horrible tragedy of the weather on the East Coast and competency in handling that compared to the incompetency of Katrina under the Republicans, and then you have, of course, Mitt Romney, at one point saying we should cut FEMA and that shouldn't be a responsibility of the federal government. I mean, that kind of thing makes people nervous. All these like philosophical arguments about we don't like government doesn't really work in times of tragedy when you really need government and you need government to step in.
How do you think this storm will affect the vote? Well, I mean, Governor Christie was very praising President Obama, but at the same time, will people on the East Coast not show up to vote because it's just not important to them when they're trying to get their electricity back on and their living situation stable?
I certainly think that there's some of that. I mean, people have issues as, well, I won't say what Governor Christie said, but people have issues that are much more important to them than this election. That are life and death, day-to-day survival issues. But if you'll take a look at what states are doing that have been hit the hardest, particularly New Jersey, they are going to be sending out mobile polling locations so people will be able to vote and to exercise that right to vote. I think that the way that this is played for the president, Hurricane Sandy, is it has shown him being presidential. It has also shown him being compassionate and understanding of the issues that people are facing. This has really been an opportunity this week for the president to really chart the course of what kind of America we want. Do we want an America where we don't have someone who says, not only would I get rid of FEMA, I'd turn FEMA over to the states. Well, what do we think New Jersey would be able to do now if it had FEMA money with the state that it's in? There wouldn't be anything they could do. They'd be stuck. They wouldn't have any way to get any kind of help if as Governor Romney said, we got rid of FEMA. We've also had an opportunity to see, particularly in just on Friday, the jobs report that came out. And it's not just the jobs report that was stronger than expected, 171,000 new jobs in October, plus going back and taking a look at the payrolls in August and September, another 64,000 new jobs. Consumer confidence is up, people are spending. Housing prices are going up and people are getting into homes now. And the stock market, which was below 8,000 when this president came into office, is now flirting with 14,000. We see a country that is headed in the right direction.
The jobs report was good today, Kevin, but the unemployment number is still really up there.
I wouldn't say it was all that great.
all the economists thought it was pretty darn good.
Well, when unemployment goes up, that's not a good sign.
Except when it does it under Walker. But go ahead.
Was your question to me or to that side of the studio?
Yeah, but it's actually not true.
But you want to talk about economy? I think that's why Mitt Romney will be the next president of the United States. And I wouldn't have said that back in August. At that time, I would have said that Barack Obama was the odds-on favorite. But then the conventions came, and you got a chance to see Mitt Romney and the Republican ticket unfiltered by the media, and suddenly America saw that this was not the same figure that was portrayed in the media. When you get behind the numbers in the polls, when you dig into the questions and answers, you find that in all of these polls, when people are asked about who is best equipped to handle the economy, the debt, the deficit, foreign policy, and get this country back on the right track, Mitt Romney kills Barack Obama.
No, he does not. That's as false as Romney's claims about the auto industry.
I think where he wins is that he has an advantage in early voting. He has an advantage with the independents. And again, when you talk about the main issues that people really care about, now I'm not talking Big Bird or bayonets. I'm talking the economy,
he brought Big Bird
deficit, the Benghazi debacle that this president, an amazing scandal that the media doesn't want to touch. All of these factors, I think, point to a Mitt Romney victory nationally. I'm not so sure about Wisconsin, and that's because, and I'm only saying this because the Republicans have a long losing track record when it comes to presidential races. But I wouldn't be surprised if this time around Mitt Romney pulls it out, because I think given what Wisconsin has gone through all year, we're revved up. Conservatives are revved up. They've got a machine in place, a ground game, and that recall of Governor Walker actually helped to stimulate and wake up conservatives who are going to be out there in full force. I think more so, you talked about turnout, absolutely right. I think that, too, is where Republicans have an edge.
So you're saying Romney by just a little bit? You're saying Romney by just a little bit?
I'd give the edge to Romney if we looked at the turnout model from 2010 elections statewide, and if you look at where the camps have been poised. I mean, one of the things that came up in the news today was that the Dems in Milwaukee were hoping to extend early voting. And that's a sign, I think, that their desire to have that extension is that they're under where they would like to be in terms of their early voting goals.
And nationally and in Wisconsin, Obama by a little bit?
I would say Obama by more than you might think. I do think he's got a strong ground game here. I'm going to have to get Kevin a new TV that gets more than one channel because there are polls that are absolutely contrary to everything that he mentioned earlier. Right. So I do think that what you will find is that early voting actually, when we take a look at it historically, favors Democrats. We have over 400. Yeah. I think you're absolutely wrong on the early voting piece. All I can tell you is every day that I've driven past the municipal building in downtown Milwaukee, there have been lines. I early voted on Sunday, At 9:30, I had to wait in line, and there were people in line at 9 o'clock when the municipal building opened last Sunday.
Nationally,
Matched by
and
early
in
voting in
Wisconsin,
Waukesha.
Obama by a little bit or a lot?
In Wisconsin, I think by quite a bit. I mean, the most recent poll shows Obama up by 8 points. It probably will be between.
Oh, you all loved it in June when it showed the governor.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. I'm having a little trouble being heard here, but
I'm sorry.
the truth of the matter is, between 3 and 5 points in Wisconsin. I think probably nationally, all the polls, and when you look at all the polls, and that's, bright people like Nate Silver look at all the polls and not just cherry pick the ones they like. It looks like about a 1 or 2% margin across the country, but because of where the swing states are, in Ohio and Virginia even, and Colorado and Iowa, all look like they could go to Obama. So I'm thinking that he will actually win by 300 electoral votes, and he only needs 270 to win. So.
Wow, we'll see what happens. Let's
calling
talk
for
local.
basically a landslide, which I think is kind of silly.
That's what he got last time.
Let's talk local now for just a minute. The Senate race between Tommy Thompson and Tammy Baldwin, it's been nasty, it's been expensive. It, too, is considered to be a very close race. Who's going to win this one, and by how much, and does this set the bar for future elections, do you think?
Do you think I'm going to come up with an answer that hasn't been anticipated? Tommy Thompson's going to win it. And the reason that he'll win it is because of the ground game that he has in place. Yes, it has been nasty. It's been expensive. It's been fraught with lies. But at the end of it all, I think when you've got somebody who's had 14 years of experience as a statewide leader, and people having voted for him time after time after time, when the Dems have put up some of their best candidates to run against him, and he's won in a number of those elections by landslides. People don't forget that easily, and when they go out to vote, they will, I think, even if they do push the ticket for the president and his reelection, I think enough of them will cross over to vote for Thompson to put him over the top. One of the things that I think is interesting about all of it is that when the Thompson campaign brought on Keith Gelks, and this is the same guy that ran the 2010 election for Scott Walker and the reelection campaign, they got a jump back in June by bringing him on board shortly after the primary. So that gave them an edge in being able to have some experienced leadership in running a significant campaign. The only problem that I think that Thompson had that I think he's overcome is that he didn't spend money early on to combat some of the negative ads that were launched against him shortly after the primary.
Kevin, how do you explain the constantly changing polls in this race? I mean, everybody 5 years ago knew everything there was to know about Tommy Thompson. How is he ahead, behind, behind?
Because I think it's inferior polling. I don't know what those people at the Marquette University Law School were smoking.
Stuff they must have been smoking in June when you
No. The polls that Marquette took during the recall of Governor Walker were consistent all the time. But here they're oversampling in Democrats. And I'm sorry, these wild mood swings, are just unexplainable. Getting back to the race, though, I think Tammy Baldwin has never been in a really tough race before.
And not a statewide.
Neither is Tommy.
This one exposed the Baldwin record that she really didn't want to talk about. Now we know all kinds of things about Tammy Baldwin, and they're scary to most voters in Wisconsin.
Kevin,
I mean, when you are to the left of Nancy Pelosi, when you are extremely liberal, I mean, I'm sorry, that doesn't appeal to. Not everybody is like Joel McNally. And please don't talk while I'm speaking, okay? Please.
When have you ever abided by that?
Please, I mean, the laughing and snickering, come on. Just 1 week, please. All right, now Tammy Baldwin, when you're to the left of Nancy Pelosi and really the most liberal person in your party that they don't even vote for your legislation, whereas Tommy has a proven track record. He's created jobs, he's cut taxes, he's been a reformer, he reformed welfare, and I think being the icon that he is and popular with crossovers, that puts him over the top.
When the recall election was going on, the Democrats had the most impressive ground game they've ever had in the history of the state of Wisconsin. Why would the results in the Thompson-Baldwin race be any different than the results in the Barrett-Walker race?
Because it was surrounded by a few issues, and it was more issue-driven than it was candidate-driven. It wasn't necessarily that people were that in love with Tom Barrett. Those were people who felt, in many cases, they just did not want Governor Walker. So that's a very, very different kind of race. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this, when people say, well, people know Governor Thompson. No, they don't. Because the Governor Thompson that people knew 14 years ago, when he ran for office for 14 years in Wisconsin, is not the person who has showed up. He has moved far to the right. He's tried to move back to the center. It's the same problem that Governor Romney has, even though Governor Romney, I think, has taken this to a new level with revisionist history. I will say Governor Thompson hasn't done that, but he had to move so far to the right to come out of the primary that he's struggling to get back to the middle. And not only is he struggling to get back to the middle, those things that he has said have been used, his own words have been used against him to show that he is not a centrist. He is to the right. He has taken positions that are not popular with people in the state, and I think Tammy Baldwin's going to win.
Can you imagine anybody going into the booth and voting for Barack Obama and then voting for Tommy Thompson?
No, and I do think that, yes, Tammy Baldwin and Barack Obama feed off each other because the president's popularity among women, for good reason, with Republicans going crazy out there talking about rape as some normal thing that God wants every woman to get, and that sort of thing. They're just, you said people weren't supposed to talk while you were talking.
Well, that needed correction.
You don't need to interrupt me all the time I'm talking. You really don't. Let me answer a couple questions. One is why this would be different than the recall. It's a different electorate. It's a different turnout. When Kevin complains about Marquette showing more Democrats than Republicans, every presidential election going back to 1984 in this state has had more Democrats than Republicans. You don't adjust your model depending on what you would like it to be. You tell what it is. And presidential elections have an entirely different turnout than that limited recall. That's one thing. The other thing is that, truthfully, I think Tommy Thompson has run the worst campaign I've ever seen in his life. It has been ugly. It has been nasty. It did not make him look good. There were people that had pretty high opinions of Tommy as a fairly moderate, decent person until he had to run in the present-day Republican Party, which is so ugly. They turned on Chris Christie this week because he said something decent about the president who happened to be a Democrat. This is the kind of ugly party it is, and you have to run an ugly campaign, and you have seen Tommy Thompson's negatives go down much farther than Tammy Baldwin's.
Just called Republicans ugly and nasty and every name in the book during the past year, but we're the bad people. We're the bad people.
It's been an ugly campaign.
Yeah, both sides.
Next topic. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the largest newspaper in the state of Wisconsin, has announced it will not endorse a candidate in the presidential race. It will not endorse a candidate in the Senate race. It says it's getting out of the endorsements business for good. Does it matter at all? Does it make any difference? Is it too old school to endorse political candidates? Or is it the irresponsible decision of a dying newspaper that's afraid of alienating any more of its customers?
Well, as you know, I just wrote a column saying that this week. There was a time when the whole purpose to have a newspaper was to provide community leadership, and you weren't afraid of taking unpopular stands. In fact, some of the proudest moments in the Milwaukee Journal's history have been taking unpopular stands, opposing Joe McCarthy when he was a senator from Wisconsin, standing up for civil rights and open housing during the 1960s. That's when I came to this town, and I heard how much people hated the Milwaukee Journal for doing that in a very conservative anti-Groppe, anti-Val Phillips, anti-civil rights Milwaukee. And I was very proud to come to work for the Milwaukee Journal. And believe me, the fact that that was an unpopular stand, the Milwaukee Journal was more successful at that moment than it has ever been since.
Does it make any difference anymore if a newspaper endorses a candidate?
I don't think they have the persuasive leadership that may have been the purview of newspapers, let's say 30 years ago. That leadership has shrunk nationally and has certainly disappeared here altogether with the Milwaukee Journal. First off, I don't think as many people read the newspaper. That's not so much debatable. But when they do read the paper, they're not looking to read the paper to get enough information to be persuaded one way or the other on those things that really matter. I read it for the obituaries and the sports pages. And
in that order?
In that order, frankly.
Or we're getting old.
And well, those are just about the only two places where facts matter in that newspaper that are indisputable. So I'm not surprised that they chickened out and decided that they weren't going to endorse, particularly in these two races. What is interesting is that the Wisconsin State Journal and a number of the other newspapers around the state, community-based newspapers more than anything, have decided that they will endorse, and they've pretty much stuck their necks out because they are showing some leadership that the Journal simply
It shows that the newspaper, it's a continuing, slow but continuing deterioration of its influence and relevancy. Now you can say, well, it doesn't really matter. They're not that persuasive. They're not exhibiting leadership. But for heaven's sakes, it's mind-boggling to me that every day of the year you are writing opinions about everything under the sun, including foods on a stick at State Fair, and yet the most important decision of this year
They don't show up.
and the next 4 years, they take a powder.
Did they learn their lesson when they endorsed Walker? And do you think they alienated too many people, and so they said, okay, we're going to stay out of this one?
Well, as I've always thought, the way newspapers are supposed to work, and that is that the editorial side is separate from the news side, and that's all separate from the circulation side. I don't think it was necessarily the Walker endorsement. I just think that you can't have a newspaper in a major community, a major market, where your editorial page was just designed to ferment discussion and opinion, steps out of what may be the biggest presidential race in a generation.
Then why have an editorial board, right?
I think it's loopy.
Why have
I just
one?
think it's a little loopy. You've stepped out on everything else. I think people in this community deserve to have that as a springboard for thoughtful discussion, and this year we don't get it.
Okay,
Hey,
well,
Denise, I agree.
one more take
with
on
you.
Election Day now. The pundits can weigh in, the pollsters can make their predictions, the candidates can keep campaigning right up to the very last minute. But for writing and editing consultant Rick Horowitz, that's only part of the picture. What matters most right now is what you do. Rick.
This is one of my favorite pictures. Ran front page in lots of newspapers. I'm pretty sure I've still got a copy at home. I like to save historic front pages, and this was definitely one of those. Recognize it? It's people, right? A long line of people snaking this way and that way in what looks to be the middle of nowhere. Actually, where it is South Africa, a rural part of South Africa. There are hundreds and hundreds of people in this line, and they're all waiting to get here to fill out a ballot, to cast a vote. This was in 1994, South Africa's first democratic elections, and people turned out from everywhere, even if it meant waiting in a line for hours. See, these people had been prevented from voting for years, for generations. Now they had a chance to have their voices heard, and they weren't about to squander the opportunity. So what about you? Are you going to squander the opportunity? Are you going to make sure your voice is heard? I know some elections are exciting, even inspirational. It's easy to go vote in those elections. And some elections just feel like an endless slog. You're frustrated. Maybe you're even a little disillusioned. That's not a good enough reason to stay home. Not unless you want your voice and your concerns to be ignored. Not unless you want to hand the keys over to people who might not have your interests at heart. People who, frankly, would prefer it if you did stay home and just let them run things. Is that what you prefer? Didn't think so. So you need to be there, even if you're not quite as excited, quite as inspired as you'd like to be. You know, I can think of 2 elections in my lifetime, 2 closely contested elections, where people said, why bother? It doesn't really matter which one of these guys wins. So they voted for third-party candidates, or they just stayed home. The first time, back in 1968, we got Richard Nixon. The second time, just 12 years ago, we got George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Turns out it really did matter. It mattered a lot. And this time, can you afford to take that chance? If you want your voice to count, you have to be counted. Go vote.
And if you disagree with Rick, you should go vote as well. Thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.